welcome to the late June edition of the Business Swansea Power Hour.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. I'm in this bizarre situation where I can't see myself or I can't see you. I just see my own screen. So, Matt, if you kind of chair for me, and if I freeze on screen or something happens, if you shout
no
out,
worries.
that would be great.
Yeah.
So as Matt said, thank you, Matt, for the opportunity for this. I was thinking of a topic to talk about, and AI was kind of screaming out at something that people are trying, and a lot of you said that you've tried it for some things, but not all. So it was just too big of a topic not to talk about. However, for me, the risk is that for you watching this live, it's fine. But if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm either going to look like a completely out-of-date person who's talking about AI from a month ago, or I'm going to look like some kind of Welsh Nostradamus that I've predicted the future, and I'll have a statue erected in the Castle Square development or something. But either way, I hope you find this useful. And anything I can't answer today, I'm happy to talk afterwards as well. So if you have got questions, leave them till the end, and then we can carry on the discussion on email if you have specific examples. So as Matt said, AI is sort of everywhere, right? You have to be living under a rock to have not seen it. And just to give you a little flavor of what's happening, I found this the other day on The Guardian, and you'll notice the very top article there. It says, AI will be everywhere, but its rise will be mundane and not apocalyptic. Then literally a few articles down, so you skip over some celebrity news, there's the complete other side of the debate. The future of AI is chilling. Humans have to come together to overcome this threat to civilization. So we really have this almost existential discussion at the moment of AI. Is it going to help us, and is it rather boring? Or is it a threat to civilization? So today's discussion is not really about that. But what it is about is the practical use of AI. And this is happening. We're not talking theoretically about AI. Lots of you have said you've used it already. And this was last week, actually. A Welsh politician used ChatGPT to write and make a speech in our Senate. So it is being used at even these sort of higher echelons of our society. People are using it now. So today's topic hopefully is very useful for you. To put today's topic in a bit of context, I just wanted to set out what exactly we do. What is Tawe Editorial, and how am I approaching this? So basically, in short, we're writing experts, I would say. So within that, what do I actually sort of mean by that? Well, if you are publishing documents, publishing books, publishing reports, we can proofread that as a kind of final step. We also offer things like copy editing. So that's if you have got a rough draft that you're pretty confident about, but not quite right, we can help you get those key messages out as well. We do another service of developmental editing. That's when it's a bit more collaborative. So we work with you to produce something. Maybe you have some really good ideas, but you're not quite sure of how to word that. So we can help you with that. And then over to the very far end is copywriting. So we can actually write for you. So we've done that in the past where you kind of give us some bullet points and some rough ideas, and we'll go away and write something to what you like. So a good way of thinking about this is from our website, actually. I think this is quite useful. So if you have a document that needs checking, then proofreading is for you. If you have a document that you lack confidence with, copy editing. If you have some major issues, we have a service, developmental editing. If you have some rough ideas, copywriting, we can help you with that. And even if you have absolutely no idea, you've been asked to write a press release and you've never done it before, you've got no idea what to do, we can sort of do a bit of consultancy and write it for you. So I'm explaining this not necessarily as a sales pitch, although I'm aware it probably comes across as a bit salesy, but just to put today's discussion in a bit of context. So the context is I'm not a tech specialist at all. I don't code. I don't program anything. My background is really as a writer. So we are using AI in our daily work, though. So perhaps my company is one of the first that's getting really severely impacted by AI. As some of you have said, you're using AI to help you write as well. So I'm just a writing practitioner that's using it every day. And so today's presentation is not coming at it from a sort of expert AI point of view, but I'm coming at it from a point of view of someone who is actually using AI every day. And it's that lived user experience. So with that in mind, my hope for today is basically just to give you some practical advice to get going with AI. This is not a sort of master's level insight into how to prompt engineer and that kind of more advanced things, but hopefully it's enough to get your foundations right. And as I said at the beginning, I'm happy to take these discussions further if there's any sort of more advanced stuff that you'd like to learn about. So just a quick summary of what I'm going to go over then. So the content, I'm very, very quickly going to introduce what AI is and more specifically about language models. Then I'm going to talk about some of the advantages that I've personally found to using AI. And then more specifically, how exactly are we using ChatGPT? So I am going to focus on one. The risk was that if I focused on several, that I couldn't get through enough. So we are going to focus on just ChatGPT and I give you some basic introductions to it, how to get going with it. And some of you mentioned that earlier about the necessity to write a compelling prompt, that initial request, right? So we're going to go into that in a bit more detail. And then I think for me is also the warnings. Warnings of using it, what are the disadvantages? And for me, what I'm slowly getting towards, this is my Nostradamus moment, my prediction is that I think we need to adopt more like sensible usage policies. So I'll explain a little bit about that. And then hopefully we'll have enough time at the end for you to ask your questions. So that's today. So straight into it then. What exactly is AI? Obviously, AI means artificial intelligence. What we mean by that is any kind of machine that can imitate intelligent human behavior. On a practical level, what does that mean? It means that it can learn from data. It can make decisions and perform tasks that are human-like. That makes sense. What's really key, though, is what distinguishes AI from other sort of tools that we already have in existence is AI is self-learning. So it's literally like a child. When a child makes a mistake in school, it will learn from that, or hopefully it learns from that, and it will then not do the mistake in the future. So that's what AI is. It's able to learn as it goes along. So with that in mind, in theory anyway, the more people that begin to use AI, the more data that it's gathering, the more of us that are interacting with AI, the more information it has, and hopefully the more accurate it becomes. So as some of you have mentioned that you've used it already, bit of background noise. If you've used it already, you might have found this, that it can become more accurate as you get to use it. So in a bit more context, so for today, I'm really focusing about AI language models. And that is basically ChatGPT. And I'll make a brief reference to a new one, Google Bard, as well. So these language models, what exactly are they? They are basically capable of understanding and generating human-like text. So there's sort of two elements going on there. It's able to understand what you were asking it. So even if you ask it a poor question, it can comprehend what you're asking it, and then it can generate an outcome for you in a human-like way. Human-like, it's quite important there, isn't it? How does this actually work? Well, this is where I don't want to get down a rabbit hole too much, but it basically does this by predicting the likelihood of a word to come up next. So I asked a friend of mine, could he explain that to me in a simple way? And he said, it's basically like a very complex program of fill in the blank. So for example, if I say to you, would you like tea or something? Most of you would say, well, coffee, because that's the most commonly used word in that sentence, right? It's predicting the next word. So AI is essentially this very complex version of fill in the blank, what comes next. That's how it works. There are other forms of AI. I'm not going to talk about these today. And I was quite interested in, someone mentioned about web design and photography. So these are areas that you might want to look in yourself. But just to give you a flavor of what else is going on within this AI ecosystem, there's one called DALL-E, or DALL-E 2 now, which basically allows you to generate images from text. So you would say, I want to have a cat in a field with a sun and blue sky, and it would produce that for you. There's one for videos, so video creation. And by the way, I'm not endorsing these. I've never used most of them, so I don't know if they're very good or not, but just to give you an idea of what's out there, really. There's one for sound. So Sound Draw, you can basically say I'd like lounge jazz music for 5 minutes with a bass guitar solo in the middle, and it will produce sound that you like. This one's quite an interesting one. Murph takes text and makes it into human-like voices, and it can do so in up to 15 languages, apparently. I've never used it, but I read an article that said Murph is a big change for podcasting. So you could potentially make your own podcast and then distribute it in 15 different languages. So you imagine that's millions of more people that you can attract. Or perhaps the creepy one for me, there's a company called MyHeritage. I'm just going to quote what they say. They have an AI system called Deep Nostalgia. It says, Deep Nostalgia lets you animate the faces in family photos so you can see them smile, blink, and laugh, just as if you'd recorded a video of them. So you basically upload some grainy black and white photo of your great-grandmother, and she'll suddenly come to life on your screen. I don't know if I like that or not. Maybe you do. So there's lots going on, but today, because of my background in writing and what I'm using every day, we're really going to focus in on ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is developed by a company called OpenAI. So if you begin to see these words, that's the difference. OpenAI is the company, ChatGPT is the program. ChatGPT, it is free. So lots of you said you've already used it. I'm assuming most of you have used the free versions of it. You need to log in, but it's free to use. There is a paid version as well, and the paid version costs you $20 a month. So it's about £16 a month, I think. The difference is that the free version is ChatGPT 3.5, whilst the paid version is ChatGPT 4. Now, my personal opinion, there's not a huge jump between the two. However, ChatGPT 4 has a lot more capabilities. So I haven't got time today, but you can use plugins. So for example, you can use a plugin of languages and it will help you to teach you languages, whereas the free version you can't. It's a simple conversation going on. So bear that in mind. You know, if you are using this every day, to me, it's a very cheap cost and you get much better results. But if you're just doing the occasional social media post, as some of you mentioned, I think the free version probably suffices for now. I mentioned Google Bard earlier. Google Bard is also free. You do need a Gmail account to log in, but Gmail accounts are free, so you can just go in and create your own Gmail account if you don't already have one. Google Bard is very similar to ChatGPT. In my opinion, right now, ChatGPT is still the better of the two for writing purposes. However, again, this is my Nostradamus prediction moment. Obviously, with Google's power and the brand behind it, I don't think it's unreasonable to predict that Google Bard will perhaps one day leap over ChatGPT in the next couple of months, years ahead. So to me, it's worth going into Google Bard now and again and seeing how it compares to ChatGPT. But at the moment, I'm still using ChatGPT almost exclusively. So what's my advantages, or what have I personally found the advantages of using ChatGPT? This might be similar to some of the things you've mentioned yourselves about using it. One is I find it incredibly efficient. It produces almost instantaneous results. It can process a lot. Someone mentioned about summarizing documents. Yeah, it's brilliant for that. I mean, it can read and summarize and produce written in seconds, right? So it's very, very efficient. I found it to be quite consistent. It's consistent that it's always available to me, which is useful because I don't always work like a 9 to 5. But it also found it sort of remembers various styles and my own approach. And it's beginning to almost understand me, which can be a little bit weird. It comes onto a point I'm going to talk about in a second. This is one of the huge advantages for corporations or large businesses, is it's scalable. What do we mean by that? It has the potential to be used by many people at once, as long as you have the capability to host it. So for example, again, my Nostradamus predictions, in the future, it could be that we don't actually have customer service people anymore, because ChatGPT or systems like it can have a conversation with you. And also linked to scalable is ChatGPT can have an almost 100% memory. So what I mean by that, if you take something like mortgages in the news right now, if you go to a mortgage advisor, there's only so much they can realistically hold in their brain. They probably have their go-to companies, their go-to offers, whereas ChatGPT doesn't. It can literally hold all of the mortgage offers that are out there, and it can maybe give you what it thinks is the best advice. So it has this huge memory that we just cannot compete with. And last of all, I found it to be quite personal. And what I mean by personal is that it basically learns from you as well. So as you start to engage with it, ChatGPT, you log in and it starts to sort of remember roughly what you're doing. So each time I don't need to tell it who I am and what I'm doing. It kind of remembers roughly what I talked about last week, and it will know that this is my kind of industry, if you like. So if you have a restaurant, it would sort of begin to understand that you are asking questions relevant to restaurants. It also drafts unique responses. So this goes back to the idea of its self-learning. So if I ask it to do something today, and I ask it exactly the same thing in 1 week's time, it's not the same result. So ChatGPT is not templates. It's not pre-written text that just gets thrown out. It is a learning model. So each response is different. And even if you and I gave it the same request, it wouldn't give us the same responses because it's this learning model. So that's some of the advantages that I've personally found, and I'm sure you found too. So let's get into the grips of how does it actually work. So for some of you that have used it already, this won't be news to you. For those of you that have maybe not really played with it too much, hopefully this is useful. ChatGPT basically works by using prompts. And now that's a word that we've kind of just applied to it. A prompt is basically any kind of instruction or a question that you ask. So it's kind of similar to Google, right? But whatever you type in Google is your prompt. You ask Google to find you something or ask it a question, it does the same. So you can ask it to do something for you, write me a letter or write something, or you can ask it questions too. As I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is conversational. So what that actually means is it's not a simple question and answer. You can actually expand and go deeper on it. So just to give you a random example, if you said, give me 10 ideas for new pie recipes, and it'll list its 10, you can just then say, tell me more about number 4. You don't have to sort of go back to the start again. It will understand the thread. And it keeps going for quite a long time like this. It can keep going many times. And as I mentioned earlier, ChatGPT is learning all of the time from all of the users, but it's also learning from you personally. So one thing I found at the very beginning is its default is American spellings. So center is ER, lots of Z's in there. And so for me in my industry, that's quite important not to have these Americanisms. So one request very early on, I said, don't give me American anymore, just write in UK spelling. And it's done it ever since. It's never given me a center with an ER or theatre with an ER. It's always done UK spelling. So it remembers from you personally. So prompting. Some of you mentioned at the beginning that you'd like to learn a little bit more about prompting and how to do it well. So hopefully the next kind of 10 minutes or so does that for you. So how do we prompt? Well, first of all, as mentioned, really, the quality of the prompt dictates the quality of the outcome. So if you write poor or unclear instructions, you are going to get weak results. So with that in mind, the challenge for us in business is really learning how to maximize this thing, right? How to prompt effectively so that we get more effective results. Because otherwise you're just going to get into a bit of a circle of poor request, poor result, start again, and you're going to go around. So how do we get effective results? Again, I'm throwing up my Nostradamus predictions here. There are even things like prompt engineers now, and I don't think it's unreasonable to see in the future that this will almost be like a skill on your CV that you can prompt ChatGPT well. It's almost like saying I can use Excel or statistical programs well. So instead of kind of throwing this out there in a random, mad way, how can we put a bit of structure onto this? So I was thinking about it, and what I've been doing is splitting this up into looking at the potential uses of ChatGPT, the potential formats that it can produce, and then thinking about potential styles. So let's talk about those in a little bit more detail. So uses, how can you actually use ChatGPT? And these are not a full list, but it's quite a good start base for you. So one is idea generation. Maybe some of you have done this. Give me 10 ideas about whatever. I've even said, give me 100 ideas, and it's given me 100 ideas. Not all are good, obviously, but you get the idea. I'm calling it an intern researcher. So if you are doing academic research, no, forget about it. But if you're just looking for someone to do a little bit of research for you, time saving, it's pretty good. So if you want to look at, for example, most popular books or authors in a particular genre, or you're looking for, maybe you want to go freelance, so recommend 10 books about freelancing and summarize them for me, it can do that pretty well. So you can use it as a sort of entry-level researcher for you, or even like a research assistant. Copywriting. Some of you have mentioned this about social media. Yeah, it can draft articles, it can do blogs, and we'll get into this in more detail, but it can write for you. Next, teacher or tutor. I've used this a little bit. Ask it to explain something to you. There was one, I think it's probably comedy, but somebody asked it to explain Brexit in the style of a 5-year-old. And the answer was something like, there's 2 boys in school and they're playing a game, but they disagree on the rules. So they don't play together anymore. That was Brexit to a 5-year-old. So it's probably humorous, but it can teach you stuff. And one thing that I've used it for quite regularly is I can use it as a critic, or maybe as kind of like an evaluator. So you can ask it to critique a certain article. So some of you mentioned about funding applications and things like that. You can sort of ask it to, if you were the funding officer, what problems would you have with this? Or what areas do you deem to be weak in my application? You can use it for things like that. Although, just be careful. I will come back to this about why you need to be careful about certain things. So that's the potential uses. Formats. What can it actually produce, right? Well, it can produce blogs, articles, reports, email, so kind of those generic writing formats. Personally, 1, 2, and 3 produce similar results. Emails are a bit better. It does understand the nature to keep it short. But it can produce lists and bullet points. It can produce an essay, which is a whole major area for universities, but we won't talk about that. It can do tweets, like you've mentioned, and not just tweets, other social media posts as well. So it does understand. So, for example, one of the power hours a couple of weeks back, Matt will know the date of this, but was about LinkedIn. So it understands the nature of LinkedIn, and it will produce social media posts that are appropriate for LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter. And it kind of understands that there is a difference between writing a blog and an email and a tweet, and it will do that for you. What's also interesting about this is that ChatGPT can also focus on specific elements of those. So, for example, if you've got an email, but you really need a compelling subject heading, you really want to catch someone's attention, ChatGPT can write the heading only. You don't have to ask it to write the whole email if you want. Or, for example, I'm really weak at social media. I'm not really social media savvy, and I ask it to create hashtags for me, and it will produce hashtags as well. So you don't have to do all of those things. It can just pick on certain points. So that's the formats. Last of all is styles. I would say this is perhaps not its strongest point, but it does lean one way or the other. So what do I mean? I mean, you can ask it to write formally. So if you're doing formal documents, it will understand the nature of formal writing. You can ask it to be creative, persuasive, friendly, conversational, descriptive, even poetic, or humorous. What I would say about this, though, and especially sort of 7 and 8, this is really, really subjective. Like, what I think is funny, you might think is ridiculous, or not funny at all, or even offensive, right? So you have to be careful about trusting GPT to do all of this tone for you. But in my experience, I found that if you ask it formal or persuasive, it's pretty good. I can explain why, because that goes back to sort of linguistics and word choice. But formal or persuasive, actually, it does it. The others, I'm not so sure about. But again, something for you to consider. So basic prompts. If you are really new to ChatGPT, or you really want to put a bit of structure into your prompts to begin with, think about your usage. What are you actually using it for? And make sure you make that clear. Think about the format that you like or want, and make sure you tell it that particular format. And then last of all, maybe you'd like to add a style, or at least not certain styles, right? So for me, I sometimes write formally. So I'd say make sure it's formal, just to cancel out all of the others. So what does this actually look like in practice? Here's a prompt. So in a formal style, write an email that critiques the following article, and then you can copy and paste your article in. So that would be a prompt. And there's my style. So I want it formal. format is I'm going to write an email. So don't write a report, write an email for me. And the usage, I want it to critique this. Now, the usage is also writing as well, I suppose. But I'm asking it to specifically critique something and then put that into an email. Another one, persuasively draft an advertising article that highlights whatever it is you're highlighting. Again, the style is persuasive, please. My usage is to draft, and my format is an advertising article. So you're beginning to sort of narrow it down. It's like a funnel. The more narrow you can get, the better. Last of all, another example of a prompt. In an academic style, explain through a list the top 10 best-selling books about whatever it is. There's my style. So I want this a bit more academic. What do I want? I want it to explain something to me. So that goes back to the sort of teacher role that it can play. And how do I want this? I want this in a list. So at the very early stages, and if this is completely new to you, I would suggest having a look at this. Now, I can share this slides with you later. I can share it in a PDF format for you. But I would focus on style, format, and usage. Try and get those three covered in your early prompts. So for some of you that are already using ChatGPT, I have you covered. So what's the next level then? And what I would say is, first of all, play around with those prompts. And actually that word play around is quite important because it's free. You can use it. Why not? So play around with it. Find out what works for you, what style works for you. Maybe you are more creative and you would like that more creative vocabulary to be used. So play around with it. But then the next level, what I found is really useful, is you need to start giving it a bit more context. And this is a bit of a fork in the road for you. And this is where start with the basic, but then move on. Is the more detailed your prompt, sometimes it gives you a fantastically detailed reply or an outcome. That's exactly what you want. But it can give you a hideously wrong detailed answer as well. And I can give you examples of what I've personally used, if you like. So the more detail you go, you run the risk of going perfectly or almost perfect or perfectly horrible. So how can we actually do this then? Again, is there some sort of structure that you can use? And I think there is, and this is what I've developed and that I'm using, is give it some basic context, add some kind of requirement if you have a requirement. And then also what I found really useful is give it the outcome that you want. What is your objective of this writing? What is the result that you really want with this particular piece of whatever it is, an email or a report or a blog? So to put that into a kind of nice visual for you, this is exactly what I do. So first of all, I explain to ChatGPT what I do. I literally write, I am a whatever it is. And you can do the same. Then I would explain who are my readers, who's going to read this or who's the audience. Then I give it the prompt. And we can go back to what we talked about the prompt. Then I will add anything extra like the requirements or the outcomes that I really want. So how does this actually look then, right? So for example, I say, I'm a professional copywriter. I need to write to organisations in Wales that want to communicate their objectives to the Welsh Government or elected politicians. So there's my audience. This is who I'm writing to. What's my prompt? In a formal and persuasive style, write a draft email to outline how I can help them to improve the effectiveness of their communications. So I want an email, and this is roughly what it's about. Then my requirement. The email should be no more than 300 words. The outcome is that the organisation should be convinced that working with a copywriter can improve their results and the service adds value to their organisation. So that's basically how I now construct my prompts. I go through each of those four. So what's the result, right? So this is literally what I just said to you. So if you start to read the top, you notice that's me. And this is what ChatGPT screen looks like if you haven't used it before. And then you'll see ChatGPT has started subjects, elevate your communications, blah, 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 blah. This is the result that it's producing. Now, some of you have mentioned the results. So let's actually analyze the results and how good is ChatGPT? So you don't have to read this. You can read it afterwards if you like. But as a writing expert, or I'm claiming I'm a writing expert, how good is it? Well, first of all, it starts off pretty badly, in my opinion. That subject of the email is not particularly good. I don't like this deliver your objectives to. It sort of reminds me of like a Monty Python sketch where like there's a Royal Mail guy and he says, got a bag of objectives for you or something like that. So I don't really like that subject, but you know, it's not horrible. I don't like the start. I trust this email finds you well. My name is. That strikes me as a little bit kind of me Tarzan, you Jane. Bit too simple for me. So yeah, not great. And then I also dislike these kind of words like passion. I have a passion for something. I think that's kind of an exaggeration. Like, do you really have a passion for helping? I don't know, maybe not. But hey, it's not that bad. No, it's not. And for me, I'm beginning to like what it's doing in this part. And I'll explain a little bit why. I understand that presenting your objectives to the Welsh Government and other elected officials is a vital part of your mission. So that's quite good. ChatGPT is it's talking in terms of you. So in copywriting, we often say you write for the reader. You don't write for what you want to say. You write for who's going to read it. So this idea of you is really important. So it's beginning to understand that, right? It's beginning to say that I understand what your objectives are and what your mission is. Then the next sentence, however, the crowded policy landscape can often make this a challenging task. So it's able to present the problem. So if I'm the reader, I'm thinking this person understands my situation and they can understand my problem. So that's pretty good. And as a writer, that's not badly phrased. I wouldn't change too much about that. And we go on, skip a bit. I quite like this part. Working together, we can clarify and strengthen your messaging, ensuring it aligns with your overall mission. Carries on. Again, as a writer, that's pretty good. Because this idea, if you're the reader and you're reading, we can clarify, that kind of in your head is beginning to see that we are a team. But as the person offering my services, I'm still saying that we are going to work as a team, but on your messaging and your objectives. That's pretty good writing. And then even this second sentence, this is kind of my style of writing, I think. This is something I would actually say. It says, my services are not just about penning down words, but about instilling your communications with the strategic intent and authenticity that encourages action. I quite like that. I would almost take that word for word. So you can begin to see that there is some good, some bad. Then I don't like this bit. Our collaboration will not just. That strikes me as a bit presumptuous, right? Like, we are going to work together. Well, no, maybe I choose to work with you. I don't. So I don't like that. And then I don't like these kind of phrases, I would love to discuss. I always read that and think, do you? You'd love to discuss? I'm not sure. That's a bit of an exaggeration to me. So that's a quick analysis of the results. And you can see, from my point of view, there are some really good bits. There are some bits that I don't particularly like. So for me, what I think is ChatGPT is a draft. That word is really important to me. It does produce quite good drafts, but I wouldn't say it produces the finished state. And this maybe goes back to what Matt said at the beginning about how he can actually see how some people have probably just copy and pasted. So don't treat it like it's going to give you the answer. But as long as you treat it as a draft, it's not bad. And the reasons you shouldn't take it as the finished article is it can and it does make errors. It does write these bizarre phrases sometimes, and often it's like Americanisms. It can be grammatically incorrect. So if you are writing formal papers, it does make errors. So there's one, dangling modifiers, and I can go into more detail about common mistakes if you like, but it does get things wrong. So to summarize the disadvantages then, one is ChatGPT only goes up to 2021. It doesn't know anything about the last year and a bit. So that's a worry or disadvantage. ChatGPT does struggle with particularly complex or nuanced requests. So if you have very specific details, you might struggle with it. You may not get what you like. It doesn't produce novelty. It only works on existing data. So whilst the idea might be novel to you, it's not a novel idea. It doesn't have sort of its own innovation. It's just basically looking out there. I work with some companies that do international. It's culturally unaware. It can sometimes verge into almost offensive if interpreted wrongly. So be aware if you are sort of writing for different types of people. It's not very good with jargon, doesn't really understand that, gets it wrong, uses the wrong one. It can be factually incorrect. Now that's a real worry, because if you don't know what the truth is, you might then start to promote this factually incorrect stuff. I would say that it's not horribly wrong. It's not kind of embarrassing. You know, it's not going to tell you the capital of the United States is Paris. It's not that bad, but it does get a few things wrong. And one as well, for some of you, if you're writing any documents, and perhaps even for Matt in the Swansea Council, there are major issues about privacy. We don't quite know who owns that conversation. So if you work with companies that need like non-disclosure agreements, this is a kind of a no-go area just because you really don't know where this information is going. Like I read something the other day, the CEO of ChatGPT has access to every conversation and everything that it's ever done. There's at least one person that can see what you're doing, and I doubt he's the only one, right? So there's major issues about privacy. So this is my final slide, just to kind of summarize all of these things. I think that the key here is that we are still the overlord. Humans are still in charge, and I wouldn't worry too much right now. But in terms of practical usage, I would consider developing sensible use policy. I think it's a little naive to basically assume that you are never going to use it. And I think it's naive to think that people in your organization are never going to use it. So if you're a manager, you have to accept that people are going to use this. Even if you say don't use it, they will. So instead of that, just accept that people are going to use it and have a sensible usage policy. And if you start to think like that, you start to see it as a tool. And when you see it as a tool, it's not radically different to something like Excel, which is or accounting programs that take all this information, right? So you still need humans. So you still need humans to proofread the authenticity and the correctness of it. You need humans to check overall that it makes sense. And you need humans to sort of synergize all this together. So this sounds like a sales pitch to you, but I don't mean it like that. Even if you don't choose a sort of professional editor or professional copywriters, don't just copy and paste this. Have somebody to actually read it yourself. Because humans do need to refine and edit the content. If you don't, you will be shown up, actually. But you don't need to do excessive amounts of editing either. So my last little point is use ChatGPT, use it to help you, but see it as a draft and don't think of it as a sort of copy and paste machine, because it's not going to do that for you. And you are going to have this initial high of thinking this is incredible, it's brilliant. But when you start to maybe analyze it, it's not quite as good as you think. So don't copy and paste, but develop your own sensible usage policy, and it can be a huge, huge benefit for you. So that's the end of this. I hope I've gone through on time. Happy to take any Q&As and a bit of contact information here. If you want to contact me, as I said, I'm happy to talk about this in more detail with you. My own experience of how I'm using ChatGPT. So feel free to contact me, and I am happy to field any questions from you. So over to you, Matt. I'm now going to try and get rid of this screen so that I can maybe see you.
Magic,
okay,
thanks, Rob. Yeah, Magic, thank you for that. Wow, lots to take in there, lots to think about, certainly. I think that message about it being a draft is really important, certainly in my usage of it. I think when you're staring at a blank sheet of paper, it's a good starting point, isn't it? And then from there on in, you can go from there. We've had 3 comments / questions. If I just run through those first of all, and then we can open the floor up to any people that want to put their hand up and ask a question. So first of all, Tanya said about can't seem to get it to consistently use British. Always seems to default for some reason. Now, when you mentioned that, you seem to be quite explicit about the instruction that you gave it. So is that sort of your tip in terms of literally just be explicit and saying, do this from now on?
Yeah, basically, what I found is for ChatGPT, you log in, so you have your own history of your own conversations. I just explicitly said, stop writing with American spelling conventions, only write in UK British in the future. And it gives you this sort of apologetic, oh, I'm very sorry about that. And then, yeah, it's worked for me ever since. So if it's not writing for you in British English, try that a couple of times. And that's what's worked for me. So hopefully that works for you too.
Great, thank you. And Catherine says, does ChatGPT restrict how many prompts you can use per day? Now, I've been on there previously, and maybe this is not a thing anymore, but it said the servers are busy, we can't accept your request. I think if you've got the premium one, it bypasses that issue. But in terms of Catherine's question at face value, is there any restriction to the amount of usage you can put through at a basic non-premium level?
No, there isn't. But as you mentioned, Matt, there was. And a couple of months ago, I did have that issue where it wouldn't let me log in for about 5 or 6 days. So it used to basically say that if the servers are busy, you're not allowed in. Now, if you paid for it, you were always allowed in. So you did have access for it. However, ChatGPT 4 does give you a warning where it says it will only give you, I think it's 35 responses within a 3-hour period. However, I've never had an issue with that, actually. And I've never counted up to 35, but for the amount of time that you're using it, no. So the free version could still block you out. It hasn't for me for months, but it did a few times. But the paid version has never not let me in. And there is a warning of 35, but I've never reached that. So it sort of depends how much you're using it, really, is my brief answer to that. If you're using it every day and a lot, the $20 is almost nothing, really. So I would recommend that. But if you're just using it occasionally, I think that the free version would probably suffice.
Great, thank you. Lucy mentions Goblin Tools. There's in the chat if anybody wants the link, which is a really good one for neurodivergent people who and has a section for changing tone style. Lucy, I'm really pleased you mentioned that. One of the things that we're looking at with our business grant process at the moment is the barrier that our process has for neurodivergent people and the challenges that they have in answering questions around funding. Now, there are reasons why the structure is the structure, is because it is government public money and we need to ask the questions that we need to. But I appreciate that for neurodivergent people, the way in which we request that information is quite challenging. So I see, I mean, Goblin Tools you put there as a specific one, but AI in general as being a sort of a really useful tool to helping people overcome things like application forms for funding. Is there anything further you want to say about that, Lucy, in terms of your experience of that particular tool and the neurodivergent angle on it in particular?
Not really. It's just really useful, and it also makes like to-do lists and stuff for you as well. So if you just like brain dump into the box, it will then generate like a clear to-do list for you, which is quite helpful as well.
Okay. Anything further on that, Rob, or are you familiar with that one? Or
no, don't know anything about it, to be honest, but it's good to see that people are using it for multiple purposes. And I think that is one thing that I hope came out from it as well, is that there are multiple functions. And one thing I didn't talk about is ChatGPT 4, the one that you pay for. It's now introducing plugins, which are essentially tools that you can use to sort of adjust how ChatGPT works. So one, this is not completely relevant, or it's not at all relevant to your point, but I used it the other day, was language learning. You can install this plugin that will basically teach you any language, and it can explain the grammar in a way that ChatGPT can't, but it uses it as well. So yeah, there is a world of sort of plugins and tools that are being now used that can be incredibly helpful, and it sounds like that one's incredibly useful for you, so that's great.
yeah, certainly I think the one of the requirements of to go back to our funding is that a requirement to produce a business plan, and again, I wouldn't advocate that anybody puts in the ChatGPT version of their business plan, but again, if you're looking at that blank sheet of paper and don't know where to start with it, it might just sort of give you that prompt to get things moving. So yeah, thank you for that, Lucy, that's really helpful. Rebecca says, do you find if using it for different clients and therefore different styles, it gets confused about the tone that you want, sort of coming at it from your profession, Rob?
No, I haven't found that. The reason why I don't is every time you log into ChatGPT, you open up a new conversation. So when I log in, I have a history of all my conversations, but each conversation is kind of like a new beginning. So at the very beginning, if I'm working on a client, so I tend to work a little bit more formal. So that mention about Welsh Government, that tends to be my thing. I'm not the kind of creative beans, means, Heinz advertising stuff. But I will at the very beginning, when I log in, I will say, I'm a professional copywriter. I need to write in a certain style, and I will give it this kind of context. And then I find that the conversation suits. And if I'm doing work for another client, I just do that little bit of context setting at the beginning. And as long as you have two separate conversations going, I find that has a clear distinction between the two. So if you're finding that you're writing in one style and you want to change your style, but it's not doing it, just start a new conversation, and hopefully that will set you back on the right track then.
Great, thanks, Rob. It's a minute to 11. I'm happy to take one or two more if anyone's got any burning questions and want to put it in their chat, or better still, put their hand up and ask the question. Was everyone happy that they've got what they need from the session? We've got one typing.
Just to add, as you're typing or thinking of your questions, I might try and find a way to send this in PDF version to you. Maybe Matt can do that through him to you, so you can have a look through this and use it as a kind of basic tool for you. And as I said at the beginning, the time is limited, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards if you have any more specific to your job. So yeah, feel free to drop me an email. I'm happy to interact a bit with you on that as well.
Okay, no further questions, Rob. Just lots of people saying thank you, very informative. Given the nature of sort of how this is developing, I think it might well be that in 12 months' time or so, we want to get you back and do another version of this, because my feeling is this is a quickly moving topic. You mentioned about the Google Bard version, and this is, I get the feeling we're probably sort of at the very beginning of where we were, or where we're going to be. So no doubt there's sort of scope for looking at this again in a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think 2 points on that really is, one is Google Bard with all the might that Google has, and the other sort of Google searches and Google Translate. This could be huge. And I think as well, that point, it's a self-learning. So we are dealing with AI in its almost infancy. It's childlike, but it's still pretty impressive right now, isn't it? So if you imagine in a couple of months' time, it could be a whole different world. And that's the risk of putting this online, and I'm going to look out of date very quickly. But hopefully enough people will watch in the short time before it comes out of date.
But thanks again to you all, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much. See you soon.